Hello. I've been asked to give a talk on preparing and writing your manuscript from the perspective of an editor. So, I'm one of the current editors for the Journal of Hand Surgery European. So, my views are mainly for this journal. If you are submitting to another journal, obviously you need to look at the requirements for that particular journal. So at the end of this lesson, you should be able to apply some basic principles of preparing and writing a manuscript, identify the pitfalls of writing papers, and also describe the attributes of a good paper. I'm going to try my best to do that. So you may have heard of the expression publish or perish. It used to be that, but nowadays there is more and more an increasing pressure to publish. We not only have to publish, but also to publish in high impact journals, and then to also think about publishing frequently in high impact journals. So there is a pressure to publish. So how do I even get started? So these are some suggestions. When you are starting out, the most important thing is to have an idea. And you have to think about whether this idea is new, is it true, and is it relevant to your field of study. So this is quite an interesting and good paper to read. Clarity and Brevity writing an article for this journal. Obviously, every journal is different. And it really addresses these three questions around the idea. Is it a new thing? Are there new information? Is it true? Is it scientifically sound? Is it relevant to your field? So now, when you're asking the we are formulating the idea, you got to ask yourself, what is the question that you are actually asking? So it must be because there is a problem and the present solutions are not ideal. So your paper is potentially presenting a new solution or maybe a new perspective to the problem. And you're going to ask yourself whether this new solution or this new perspective, is it new? Is it true? Is it relevant? So is it new could refer to a new technique or new techniques that you are proposing or you have invented. Or it could be a new way of measuring results at which nobody has really looked at before. It could be a new study comparing two different established techniques, but nobody has really done that before. So people are very interested to find out how they differ. Or it could be a systematic review. So a new way of measuring, for example, could also refer to patient-reported outcome measures, which is increasingly popular. So once you have the idea, a very important part of writing a paper is storytelling. I cannot overemphasize how important this is. There must be a flow. Just as a story has a beginning, a middle, and an end, a paper must also have that. So when you read a story, for example, you know there's a beginning, the context, where does the story take place, what are the characters, what's the problem. There is a middle, and then there is an end, there is a conclusion. So there must be this feeling that when somebody is reading a paper, they are actually reading a very good story. So there is a beginning, a middle, and an end. So the structure of this story obviously is not just a beginning, middle, and end. It is a well recognized structure of introduction, methods, results, and discussion. So the introduction refers really to the prologue, the methods and results refer to the body, and the discussion and the conclusion to the epilogue. And I cannot overemphasize again the importance of flow. There must be a connection from the introduction to the methods to the results to the discussion. That means when I read a paper, I'll read the abstract that will give me an idea what this paper is about, and then I will read the introduction. And then I will read the methods to see whether the methods actually relates to the introduction, and then the results, whether it actually relates to the methods and introduction, and whether your discussion discusses what the problem is and what your results are. As you read this, you should get a sense that each section builds upon one another. There should be a final climax, and then wow, that is a good paper. So let's break it down. So when you're writing the introduction, just start off by thinking, does the introduction tell you the problem? Think about this question. And then after that, does it explain the question you're asking? And does it tell you what you intend to do about it? So you should start off with a general statement, but keep it very short. The introduction should be less than 500 words. So the management of something remains challenging, for example, and that's about it. However, what is the problem? What is the question you're asking? However, there remains or whatever something is not being looked at in detail, there is a paucity of information, and therefore the purpose of this study was to do what? So that's the introduction. It tells you the problem, the question you're asking, and what you intend to do about it. So again, as mentioned, keep it short. So when I look at a paper, the first thing that will draw me to the fact that it could potentially be a good paper is when the introduction is short, concise, to the point. So common pitfalls: an introduction that is super long, more than a page and a half. It contains lots and lots of textbook information, which is really not necessary. The reader knows these things. You don't have to write textbooks information with lots and lots of literature. You don't have to use the classic literature for every condition that you're describing. For example, if you're writing a paper about carpal tunnel syndrome, you don't have to quote the first description of carpal tunnel syndrome, for example, but keep the literature very concise, very to the point. Another pitfall is when you fail to describe the question or the problem and what you intend to do about it. So after I finish reading the introduction, I have no idea what this paper is about. So keep your introduction short, concise, and very clear. What is your question? What you intend to do about it? And just lead the reader straight on to the methods. So when you're writing the methods, the questions you have to ask yourself is, what kind of study did you perform? Did your methods convincingly try to answer the study question? And then finally, is your study design sound? So the way you write it is quite a standard format. We carry out a retrospective, prospective, randomized control trial, whatever. And then in your methods, you have to be very clear what you actually did. One group received this, the other group received that. And what did you actually measure? Is what you measured the right test for what you're trying to find out? So the reader should be able to sense a very clear and coherent flow to your paper. So some good tips: use good headings so that the reader can find it easier to follow. If there's lots and lots of information, a laboratory study, for example, put it on supplementary material. Common pitfalls: no mention of the ethical approval statement. So you must mention ethical approval was obtained, whatever. Disorganization: the information should be in the results. So you quote lots and lots of numbers, follow-up time, age, and everything. All these things should be in the results, but you shouldn't quote that in the methods. Not really sure who did the surgery or who did the measurement. It is the wrong description of study. You said that it was a prospective randomized control trial, and then in your description you found out that it's actually retrospective. The dates are wrong, the methodologies are wrong, the statistics are wrong. So make sure your methods are very well described, very clear, and contain the essential information. Again, this is another good paper to read. This is, sorry, I didn't put down the authors, Tang and Giddings, 2017, why and how to report surgeons' levels of expertise. This really matters because you can have a beginner surgeon, for example, reporting his results, and that has not as heavy an impact as an experienced surgeon, for example. And then we come to the results. Again, the questions to ask are, did the description of your results actually shed light or answer the problem? Statistics, okay, so when you present your results clearly, you should do it with a p-value that actually meant something. So you can say there's no significant difference between whatever. You could quote lots and lots of statistics and p-value and r-value and coefficient, but all of this must have meaning. And then describe your primary findings and your secondary findings. So what matters most is not only what you found, but how you described it. So statistics is all about how your data relates to the question asked at the beginning. Data alone is not interesting or not enough. There's no point quoting lots and lots of data with lots and lots of complicated statistics. That is not going to impress anybody. It is the interpretation of the data that we are interested in and how it relates to clinical material. Okay, so when you are writing the results, use appropriate headings, again, and use appropriate tables and figures. So common pitfalls: inadequate use of numericals, mean, standard deviation. For example, you just quote a number without saying whether this is the mean, or what's the range, or what the standard deviation is, or if you use a median, what is the interquartile range, that kind of thing. Using annoying decimal places, for example, 30.0005 degrees, you know that you can never measure degrees to that extent. Where the follow-up is inadequate, okay, so you must follow the literature in terms of what is the minimum length of follow-up in for your particular field, what is acceptable. Constructing tables that are very hard to understand, which are untidy and disorganized. I'll give you an example of that later on. Figures that are very poorly presented and very low resolution. It's very hard to figure out what you're actually trying to show. So let me give you some insights about a good table. A good table is actually very hard to design. As an editor, I spend a lot of time trying to redesign the table to make it understandable. Because tables are the way to succinctly present data. You can write lots and lots of words, or you can construct a good table. So a long list of patients is pointless unless it's a very rare condition and the numbers are very small. So if you come out with a chart of 50 patients, nobody's going to read that. They only want to know what the summary is. Organize data clearly and succinctly so that you look at a table, you can understand it at one glance. Avoid presenting complicated statistics in tables with terms that are hard to understand. Put p-values, don't put anything else that is very complicated. Okay, one column should correlate with that in subsequent column, or should build onto the next column. Okay, and avoid too many columns. So I'm going to give you an example. So let's say your methods is that you have divided 30 patients into two groups, 15 each. Group A had one intervention, Group B had another, and then you're measuring their strength. So you're presenting your results. So let me give you two examples of how you can present this result. So this is one. Column 1 is groups A and B, number of each group, the results of each group, and your p-value. So this is an acceptable table. It's not bad, but let me show you a better example of a table. So if you look at that, okay, I hope you agree this is a better table. It's more elegant, it's more succinct, it's more concise. Now, you may wonder why this looks better. So group A, n equals 15, 8, group B, n equals 15, 9, and then p-value. Let me tell you why. First of all, there are 3 columns here instead of 4. So dividing A and B, the groups and the number into 2 columns is unnecessary. Group them into 1. So just think about it. If you find that you are able to reduce the column by just rearranging your results, do it, because the overall results will always look better. Now, figures and charts. Okay, a few good clinical case illustrations with nice pictures is better than many poor quality pictures. Trying to send in too many pictures and thinking that's going to impress the editor is never going to work. So what kind of chart should you use? A line graph will show changes over time. A pie chart will show proportions, and a scatter plot will show relationships between continuous variables. So let's look at this, which I got off the internet, comparing people who go to the cinema, buy DVDs, or have legal downloads, and it's just showing the trend over the years: cinema, legal downloads, and DVDs. So this is the line graph showing the changes over time. Now, you may look at this pie chart and think it's providing the same information, but not really, because this is telling you the proportion. It's not really telling you the changes over time. So be very clear what charts you are using and why. Now we finally come to the discussion, and the questions to ask is, has your study concluded something about the problem at the beginning and given some answer? Remember the flow again. How does your results compare to the current literature? How does your results impact current practice? What future studies can be provided? So some tips about writing a discussion. It should not be, again, very long, not more than 900 words. People think that the discussion is the textbook bit of the paper. It's not true. It is not writing a textbook. Discussion is all about the discussion of your findings and how it compares to the existing literature. So how do you write it? Well, you can start off really just by this statement: our results showed. You may think this is in your results, but here is when you discuss your results. Our results showed this, 3 or 4 important findings from your result, and then a short summary of why it is relevant. And then you then go on to the literature. So what you do is that for every one of these 3 or 4 important findings, you describe them one by one. So you pick the first one, and then you describe 2 or 3 relevant studies in the literature, what they found, and then you summarize the paragraph by stating what your study found, and then how it complemented or contrasted with the literature. So you just do that 3 or 4 times for the 3 or 4 important findings you do, and that is the structure of your discussion. Then you end up with a paragraph about limitations, and then a conclusion paragraph. That is discussion. Nothing more than that. Not chunks and chunks of information which people can read in a textbook. So you must always have a limitations paragraph, and the limitations are usually because of the small numbers, limited follow-up, because of bias, because some studies cannot be translatable to the clinical scenarios, and then therefore your recommendation is that future studies can include blah 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 blah, and then you have a conclusion paragraph. So I hope that's been useful. Sorry, this should be writing a paper, but an abstract is actually the same thing as well. Have an idea, have a concept of storytelling, beginning, middle, and end. Remember the flow, remember how it builds upon one another, and the whole thing must end with this great conclusion, and the reader should be left feeling satisfied. Let me just end quickly by giving you some of my thoughts as an editor over the past couple of years. So the decision we make for every paper that has been submitted lies in one of these 4 categories. We either reject it, or we ask the authors to carry out major revision or minor revision. Minor revision is very rare, or convert to a short report. You would never accept an article at the first submission. Almost never happens. So what tends to get a paper rejected? So after reading the paper, after reading the reviewer's comments, I feel a sense of disappointment. And very often this is because the initial title promises, but the paper does not deliver. You just end with this sense of anticlimax. The methods are not robust enough, or the methods are okay, but they are not long enough follow-up. There is nothing new in the results. These are old news, and it can be a very good, well-written paper, but there's just nothing new. And that fault lies with the initial questions. So I often feel quite terrible rejecting the paper because I know so much work has gone into it, but it's just nothing new. So there's no point, because I know that people will look at the journal and go, why are you accepting papers like that? The conclusion is completely fabricated because the study did not show that. Or the data is not accurate, and therefore your conclusion cannot be true. Finally, you can reject a paper because the paper is very disorganized. It basically needs to be rewritten, shows a lack of effort, interest, can't be bothered, didn't read the instructions. Very poor grammar is another reason. However, that is not the most important one, because that can still be salvaged. So what tends to get a paper accepted? An overall good feeling. A good question has been asked at the beginning. A good question is one that challenges existing dogmas. But you present a novel solution. You're not challenging it for the sake of challenging it. And then you design a good study to answer the question. And we need papers like that. So for these papers, even if lots of work needs to be done, the grammar is poor, the organization is not great, the results are interesting, it can be salvaged, we will try to work with it. But the best papers are those that are easy to understand, there is a flow, there are no wild claims. So generally, following submission, you'll be sent for reviews, and then a decision will be made. You'll be sent back to the authors for revision. You'll be sent back to the reviewers again, and then another revision, and then the editor will start revising. Sometimes sent back to the reviewers again, and then there'll be a revision again, and then the editor will revise, and then a revision again, and sometimes this can go up to revision 4, 5, 6 before a final acceptance. There is a tremendous amount of work involved in getting one paper accepted finally into publication. On average, it's about 6 weeks to the first decision for the Journal of Hand Surgery. It's about 18 months to paper publication and 12 months to EPUB. So there is a lot of work that goes into each paper. So don't be disheartened. If your paper is being asked to revise lots of times, eventually you will get there. How can I improve my paper writing skills? Read good papers. In every journal website, you will find those recommended papers by the editor. Learn how to ask good questions. This is in your clinical practice. Learn what is a good flow, and again, that's by reading good papers. Uh, Learn sound methodologies, and very useful tip is to attend journal clubs. The BSSH has journal clubs every 2 months where we invite the authors, expert panel, and also the handling editors to come and discuss the papers. So more information can be found on the BSSH website. So I hope the learning objectives have been um, achieved, and this has been a useful talk for you. Thank you very much.